Unknown. Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. 200 hours. In the suffocating darkness of the Solomon Islands, Private Robert Young Deere of the 164th Infantry Regiment checked his M1 Garand rifle one final time. His unit had landed on the island just 11 days earlier, on October 13th, becoming the first U.S. Army formation to take part in offensive operations against the Japanese. Now entrenched beside Marines, still equipped with bolt-action Springfield rifles, the soldiers of the 164th clutched their semi-automatic weapons, 8 rounds loaded in each en-bloc clip. Through the stifling humidity and the droning of nocturnal insects came a sound that turned every American's blood to ice. Thousands of Japanese soldiers beginning their charge, shouting "Banzai" and "Totsugeki" at the top of their lungs. Among the attackers, Lieutenant Kenji Yamamoto of the 29th Infantry Regiment urged his platoon forward. His Type 38 Arisaka rifle, with its unwieldy 31.4-inch barrel, was cumbersome in the thick jungle growth. The 5-round internal magazine was loaded with 6.55 50mm Arisaka cartridges, each requiring him to work the bolt up, back, forward, down. Behind him, newer recruits carried the Type 99 rifle chambered for the stronger 7.7 and 58mm round, still bolt action, still limited to 5 shots before reloading with stripper clips. What would unfold over the next 12 hours of brutal fighting would prove why. American infantry enjoyed a decisive edge in firepower, an advantage the Japanese had never imagined. The technological gulf between the semi-automatic M1 Garand and the bolt-action Arisaka rifles would prove as crucial as any battlefield tactic, showing how industrial progress and mass production could shape the fate of infantry. Warfare in the world's first truly modern conflict, the battle soon to erupt at Henderson Field, would highlight a central truth of the Pacific War. Though Japanese troops fought with astonishing courage and resolve, they were burdened by rifle technology that belonged to an earlier generation. The M1 Garand's semi-automatic system, 8-round capacity, and powerful .30-06 Springfield cartridge gave American soldiers a rate of fire and stopping, power that Japanese infantry simply could not rival. This imbalance in small arms capability would echo across countless clashes throughout the Pacific, from the steaming jungles of New Guinea to the volcanic wasteland of Iwo Jima. Contributing greatly to eventual American victory, the M1 Garand was the creation of Canadian-born American designer John Cantius Garand, who began his work at Springfield Armory in 1919. After 17 years of experimentation and refinement, the U.S. Army officially adopted his rifle on January 19th, January 9th, 1986, making America the first nation to equip its infantry with a standard-issue semi-automatic rifle. The weapon fired the powerful .30-06 Springfield cartridge, launching a 150-grain M2 ball projectile at 2,850 feet per second from a 24-inch barrel, producing 2,656 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. The brilliance of Garand's design lay in its gas-operated rotating bolt system. A small amount of propellant gas was drawn from a port near the muzzle, driving an operating rod that automatically cycled the action. Each trigger pull fired one shot, while the gas pressure ejected the spent casing and chambered. The next round, without any manual effort, a well-trained soldier could deliver 40 to 50 accurate shots per minute, more than double that of 15 to 20 possible with a bolt-action rifle. The 8-round en-bloc clip could be reloaded from above in under 3 seconds by an experienced marksman. The development process, however, had its challenges. Early versions used a primer-actuated system that proved unreliable. Originally designed for the 276 Pedersen cartridge, the rifle's fate changed in 1932 when General Douglas MacArthur ordered retention of the .30-06 round to make use of existing ammunition stores. Though this delayed production, it ultimately proved beneficial, as the more powerful cartridge delivered excellent range and stopping power. The Arisaka family of rifles traced their origins to Colonel Nariakira Arisaka's Type 30 design of 1897, which replaced the outdated Murata rifles then in use. By World War II, Japanese forces primarily fielded two models: the Type 38, adopted in 1905, and the Type 99, introduced in 1939, the 2599th year of the Japanese calendar. Type 38 partider. It fired a 6.5 Vitex 50mm semi-rimmed cartridge with a 139-grain bullet at 2,500 feet per second, generating roughly 1,650 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. The Type 99 fired a heavier 182-grain bullet from its 7.7 Twite 50mm cartridge at about 2,400 feet per second, producing 2,300 foot-pounds of energy. Both rifles used 5-round internal magazines, loaded via stripper clips. The Type 38's long, 31 4-inch barrel made it one of the longest service rifles ever, issued superbly accurate at range, but extremely awkward in close-quarters jungle combat where engagements were often under 100 yards. The Type 99's shorter 25.9-inch barrel improved handling, but arrived too late to fully replace its predecessor. The Arisaka action itself was exceptionally strong post-war. Testing showed it to be sturdier than the American Springfield, British Lee Enfield, or German Mauser mechanisms. The rifles featured a unique, quiet safety and a gas venting system to protect the shooter from ruptured cartridges. Yet these clever engineering touches could not overcome the inherent disadvantage of a manually operated bolt in an age of automatic firepower. The industrial disparity between America and Japan became starkly apparent in rifle production figures. Between 1936 and 1945, American factories produced approximately 5.4 million M1 Garand rifles. Springfield Armory led production with 3.5 million rifles, while Winchester Repeating Arms Company contributed 513 TT-8 and 80 rifles. International Harvester and Harrington and Richardson would add additional production during the Korean War. Peak production at Springfield Armory reached 1,000 rifles per day by January 1944, with Winchester achieving 600 rifles daily at their height. This massive output ensured that virtually every American infantry soldier and Marine in the Pacific carried the semi-automatic rifle. By mid-1943, the U.S. military's allocation system prioritized combat units, with the Marine Corps receiving 22,000 M1 Garands per month in early 1943, despite their initial reluctance to adopt the rifle. Current trade. The end of fiscal year 1942, the Marine Corps possessed 62,286 M1 Garands, though not all had reached frontline units. Japanese production presented a starkly different picture. From 1905 to 1945, Japan manufactured approximately 3 million Type 38 rifles across multiple arsenals, including Koshiawa, later Tokyo, Kakura, Nagoya, and Mokdan Arsenal in occupied Manchuria. Type 99 production from 1939 to 1945 reached roughly 3.5 million units manufactured at 9 different arsenals, including 2 outside Japan proper, Mokdan in Manchukuo and Jinsan in Korea. Despite these substantial numbers totaling over 6 million rifles, Japan never achieved the production rates necessary to fully modernize their infantry arms. Many second-line troops, garrison forces, and naval infantry units still carried Type 38 rifles at war's end, creating logistics complications with 2 different ammunition types in use. American M1 Garand production maintained remarkably consistent quality throughout the war. Springfield Armory's quality control procedures rejected any rifle that failed to group within 5 in at 100 yards. Interchangeability of parts between rifles from different manufacturers was strictly enforced through detailed specifications and gauging requirements. A damaged M1 Garand could be repaired in the field using parts salvaged from other rifles regardless of manufacturer. The adoption of improved heat treatment processes in 1942 actually increased receiver strength over pre-war production. The finishes evolved for practicality rather than economy. The switch from blued steel to parkerizing improved corrosion resistance in tropical environments. Walnut stocks gave way to birch and other hardwoods due to walnut shortages, but functionality never suffered. Late war simplifications included stamped trigger guards replacing milled ones, but these changes were thoroughly tested to ensure reliability. Japanese manufacturing quality, conversely, deteriorated markedly as the war progressed. Early Type 99 rifles featured remarkable innovations. Chrome-lined barrels, actually the first military rifle with this feature, anti-aircraft sights with folding arms for leading aerial targets, dust covers to protect the action, and integral wire monopods for stability. The finish was a deep blue, and stocks were made from quality Japanese hardwood with precise inletting. By 1944, these refinements had vanished under production pressure and material shortages. Last-ditch rifles exhibited rough machining marks, simplified fixed rear sights to eliminate the complex ladder sight, wooden butt plates, replacing metal, and inferior wood with poor fitting. Some final production rifles lacked even basic finishing with visible tool marks on all metal surfaces. The chrome lining disappeared as chromium became scarce, monopods were eliminated, and even the imperial chrysanthemum marking became crudely stamped rather than precisely rolled. The M1 Garand semi-automatic action provided multiple tactical advantages beyond simple rate of fire. After each shot, the soldier maintained his sight picture and cheek weld, while the rifle automatically cycled. This meant faster target reacquisition and more accurate follow-up shots. The operating rod, driven by gas pressure tapped near the muzzle, cycled with sufficient force to function reliably, even when fouled with mud, sand, volcanic ash, or carbon buildup from extended firing. The end-block clip system, while sometimes criticized for its distinctive ejection ping that allegedly alerted enemies the rifle was empty, actually provided the fastest reload of any contemporary military rifle. A trained soldier could reload in under 3 seconds versus 5 to 7 seconds for a skilled user working with stripper clips on a bolt-action rifle. The clip ejection also provided immediate tactile and audible confirmation that the rifle was empty, preventing the confusion that could occur with rifles that didn't indicate an empty magazine. The M1's weight of 9.5 LE, while heavy by modern standards, helped manage the substantial recoil of the .36 cartridge, enabling rapid, accurate follow-up shots. The rifle's length of 43.6 in was well balanced with weight distributed between the heavy barrel and solid wood stock. The two-stage military trigger, while not match-grade, provided consistent performance that soldiers could master with training. The Arisaka rifles, despite their robust construction and theoretical accuracy, suffered from inherent limitations of bolt-action operation that became critical in Pacific combat. After each shot, the soldier had to manually cycle the bolt through 4 distinct movements, rotating the bolt handle upward, pulling it fully rearward to extract and eject the spent case, pushing it forward to strip a fresh round from the magazine and chamber it, then rotating the handle down to lock. This process broke the shooter's firing position, disrupted sight alignment, and required 2 to 3 seconds even for a well-trained soldier. The Type 38's extreme length of 50.3 in made it particularly unsuitable for jungle warfare. Japanese soldiers found the rifle catching on vines, difficult to swing onto targets in dense vegetation, and nearly impossible to use effectively in bunkers or fortified positions. The long barrel, while providing excellent long-range accuracy with minimal bullet drop, was a liability when combat ranges rarely exceeded 100 yards and often occurred at conversational distances. The 5-round magazine capacity meant Japanese soldiers had to reload 60% more often than Americans to fire the same number of rounds. Loading via stripper clips required opening the bolt, positioning the clip correctly, pressing the rounds down into the magazine while withdrawing the clip, then closing the bolt, a process taking 5 to 7 seconds under ideal conditions and much longer under combat stress, or in awkward firing positions. The 3306 Springfield cartridge used by the M1 Garand was already standard throughout the U.S. military for the M1 Springfield rifle, M1917 Browning machine gun, M1919 Browning machine gun, and Browning automatic rifle. This commonality simplified logistics immensely. A single ammunition type could supply rifles, automatic rifles, and machine guns. The cartridge's rimless design fed reliably from clips, belts, and magazines. American ammunition production was staggering. The Lake City Army Ammunition Plant alone could produce 200 million rounds annually by 1943. Frankfurt Arsenal, Denver Ordnance Plant, and other facilities added hundreds of millions more rounds. Quality control ensured consistent ballistics. M2 ball ammunition maintained a velocity variation of less than 40 km/s between lots. Japanese forces faced a more complex ammunition situation. Units equipped with Type 38 rifles required 6.5 AVITS 50mm semi-rimmed ammunition, while those with Type 99s needed 7.7 58 mm rounds. The 6.5mm round, while generating less recoil and allowing soldiers to carry more ammunition, proved inadequate against covered positions and lacked stopping power. The 7.7mm round addressed these deficiencies, but created a dual supply requirement. This 2-caliber system created persistent logistics problems. Documented instances include the 23rd Infantry Regiment on Guadalcanal receiving 7.7mm ammunition for their Type 38 rifles, rendering both weapons and ammunition useless. Similar mix-ups occurred during the Philippines campaign and on isolated island garrisons. The semi-rimmed design of the 6.5mm cartridge occasionally caused feeding problems in tropical conditions where ammunition became corroded. When the U.S. Army's 164th Infantry Regiment, a North Dakota National Guard unit, arrived at Guadalcanal on October 13, 1942, they brought with them something the Marines desperately wanted: M1 Garand rifles. The Marines, still armed primarily with M1903 Springfield bolt-action rifles, watched with a mixture of envy and skepticism as the Army soldiers unloaded their semi-automatic weapons. During the climactic battle for Henderson Field on October 24 to 25, 1942, the advantages became undeniably clear. Staff Sergeant Mitchell Page, though a Marine armed with a machine gun rather than a rifle, fought alongside soldiers of the 164th and witnessed their firepower firsthand. Private First Class James Cass of Company M, 164th Infantry, later recalled, "The Japs came at us in waves, barely visible in the darkness, except for the glint of their bayonets. With our Garands, we could put 8 rounds into them before they covered 30 yards. Each man was like a machine gun section. We'd fire, the rifle would cycle itself, and we'd fire again. No working a bolt, no breaking our sight picture, just squeeze, boom, 8 times before reloading." The 164th's companies were fed into the line piecemeal as the Japanese attack developed, reinforcing Marine positions that were beginning to buckle. The devastating semi-automatic fire from the fresh Army troops helped stabilize the line. Colonel Bryant Moore, commanding the 164th, reported that his men expended over 250,000 rounds of 30 caliber .06 ammunition in the 2-day battle. Japanese bodies stacked up in front of positions held by the 164th, many killed by the rapid, accurate fire of M1 Garands. Marine Private Robert Leakey, who would later write the memoir Helmet for My Pillow, observed the Army troops in action. "We thought they were green, these dog faces with their new-fangled rifles. But when the Japs charged, those Garands spoke with a voice we'd never heard before. It was like a continuous roar, not the sporadic crack of our Springfields." Sergeant Masao Watanabe, of the 29th Infantrified and 15th Infantry Regiment, 2nd Division Sendai, survived the October offensive at Guadalcanal. In his post-war memoir discovered in Japanese military archives, he wrote, "We were told the Americans were soft, that our Yamato spirit would overcome their material advantages. Our officers assured us that one Japanese soldier was worth 10 Americans. But when we charged their lines that October night, it was like running into a wall of lead. Every American soldier seemed to have an automatic weapon. Our Arisaka rifles, which we operated the same way our fathers had in the Russo-Japanese War, felt like antiques. We would fire once, work the bolt while taking cover, then fire again. In that same time, the Americans had already fired 4 or 5 rounds. Watanabe noted that Japanese tactics developed against Chinese forces, often armed with older weapons or limited ammunition, proved suicidal against American firepower. The banzai charge that had scattered Chinese conscripts melted away before American rifles that never seemed to stop firing. We could not get close enough to use our bayonets. Our supposed advantage in spirit and close combat meant nothing when we were shot down 50 meters from their lines." Lieutenant Hiroshi Takahashi of the 230th Infantry Regiment provided another perspective in a letter found on his body. "The American automatic rifles are devastating. Each soldier can fire as fast as our light machine guns. When we advance, it sounds like we are attacking a position defended entirely by machine guns. Our men fall before they can work their rifle bolts for a second shot. At Cape Gloucester in December 1943, Marines of the 1st Marine Division, now fully equipped with M1 Garands after their earlier experience on Guadalcanal, landed in torrential rain on New Britain. Private First Class Eugene Sledge, author of With the Old Breed, later wrote about the M1's performance in the horrific conditions. "That Garand was the most reliable piece of equipment we had. In rain that came down like waterfalls, in mud that sucked at you like quicksand, that rifle kept firing. The Japs with their bolt actions couldn't match our rate of fire. When they tried to set up positions in the jungle, we could put so much lead into the trees that leaves would fall like rain." Marine Sergeant John Basilone, who would earn the Medal of Honor on Guadalcanal, primarily for his actions with machine guns, also carried an M1 Garand as his personal weapon. He noted, "The Garand gave every Marine the firepower of 3 men with bolt-action rifles. In the jungle, where you might only get a glimpse of the enemy for a second or two, being able to fire multiple shots without working a bolt meant the difference between killing him or him escaping to kill you later." During the Battle of Saipan in June 1944, Thelarguest Banzai Charge of the Pacific War saw over 3,000 Japanese soldiers assault American lines in a desperate pre-dawn attack. On July 7th, Private First Class Harold Agar Holm of the 4th Marine Division, armed with his M1 Garand, helped repel the massive assault. Corporal John Miller recalled, "The Japs came at us shoulder to shoulder, screaming like banshees. Our Garands never stopped firing. As fast as we could pull the trigger, we fired. The ping of empty clips ejecting was constant, like some deadly music. The Japs with their bolt actions couldn't match our volume of fire. They'd get 1 shot off, maybe 2 if they were lucky, before our semi-autos cut them down." On Pelot in September 1944, the 1st Marine Division faced Japanese forces who had learned from earlier defeats. Instead of banzai charges, they defended from fortified positions. But even in this defensive role, the bolt-action Arisaka proved inferior. Marine Corporal R.V. Bergen recalled, "When we spotted a position, we could saturate it with rifle fire. 4 or 5 of us with Garands could put 40 rounds into a cave mouth in the time it took them to fire 5 or 6 shots back. We'd keep their heads down while other Marines maneuvered with flamethrowers or demolitions. American training doctrine for the M1 Garand emphasized exploiting the rifle's semi-automatic capability while maintaining accuracy. At training camps across the United States, Fort Benning, Camp Perry, Fort, and dozens of others, soldiers spent weeks mastering their rifles. The standard qualification course required engaging targets from 100 to 500 YD with emphasis on rapid target engagement and smooth trigger control. The Army's Field Manual 23.5 Basic Field Manual, U.S. Rifle Caliber 30 M1 specified that soldiers should achieve a sustained rate of 40 to 50 aimed shots per minute in combat training, stressed maintaining the proper sight picture and alignment between shots, since the semi-automatic mechanism didn't require a shooter to break position. Soldiers were taught to fire, observe impact, adjust, and fire again swiftly, fully exploiting the M1's potential. Ammunition issued for training was abundant by any measure. Recruits fired at least 210 rounds during qualification, with extra ammunition available for advanced instruction. Combat units preparing for the front often expended thousands of rounds per man, building instinctive familiarity and confidence that later proved priceless in battle. The Marine Corps, initially cautious about the M1 Garand due to fears of ammunition waste and declining accuracy standards, eventually adopted even more demanding training regimens. Marine doctrine emphasized controlled volume of fire, not wild bursts, but rapid, deliberate shots that leverage the M1's semi-automatic operation while preserving the Corps' traditional precision. Japanese marksmanship training, rooted in samurai traditions of discipline and accuracy, followed the philosophy of one shot, one kill. Ichigeki Hisatsu. This ideal embodied both the warrior's spiritual focus and the practical limits of bolt-action rifles. Japanese infantry trained extensively in long-range accuracy, with the Type 38's Sachitu Orintied 88's precision at distance regarded as a prime virtue. The Imperial Army's manuals declared, "The spirit of attack must be the infantry's primary weapon. The rifle and bayonet merely extend the soldier's will." This emphasis on spirit over material strength would prove disastrous against modern American firepower. Japanese troops practiced bayonet drills daily, their movements sharp and cat-like. The Type 38's great length gave it theoretical superiority in close combat. Yet the jungles of Guadalcanal, New Guinea, and elsewhere rarely offered clear fields of fire. The Banzai assaults that once worked against poorly armed forces collapsed under the devastating storm of semi-automatic fire. The sound of massed M1 Garands became a weapon of fear itself. The rapid, rhythmic crack of rifle fire, punctuated by the distinctive metallic ping of ejected clips, shattered morale. A captured Japanese training guide from 1943 warned, "American automatic rifles create a noise like many machine guns firing. Do not fear this firepower. Remember your spiritual strength." But faith in spirit could not stand against mechanical superiority. Captured Japanese infantryman Yukio Nakamura, taken at Saipan, told his interrogators, "We were told Americans were weak, hiding behind their machines. But their rifles never stopped shooting. It was like fighting against a machine, not men. Our officers ordered bayonet charges, but we died before we could reach them." For American soldiers, that same firepower bred immense confidence. Marine Corporal James Russell recalled, "Knowing you could send 8 rounds as fast as you could pull the trigger made you feel unstoppable. When the Japs charged, you didn't panic. You just kept firing until they dropped, or you heard that ping telling you to reload." At the squad level, the M1 Garand's advantage was overwhelming. A U.S. rifle squad of 12 men, 10 armed with M1s and 2 with Browning automatic rifles, could deliver 400 to 500 aimed rounds per minute in sustained fire. A comparable Japanese squad with Arisakas might manage 150 to 180 rounds, even at top bolt-action speed. This disparity reshaped small unit tactics. American squads could effectively execute fire and maneuver, with one team laying suppressive fire while the other advanced. The volume of accurate semi-automatic fire kept enemy heads down, enabling movement and assault. Japanese squads, restricted by bolt-action weapons, struggled to provide covering fire without losing mobility. At company strength, roughly 200 men, the imbalance became catastrophic. A U.S. rifle company could unleash crushing defensive fire against Japanese attacks. During the October 24-25 defense of Henderson Field, the 164th Infantry Regiment proved this decisively. Company G alone expended over 30,000 rounds of .30-06 ammunition in a single night, averaging 150 per soldier, while taking minimal losses. The math was unrelenting. A Japanese battalion of 800 charging men faced American companies capable of firing 8,000 aimed rounds per minute. Even allowing for night, confusion, and fear, such firepower carved kill zones no courage could cross. The M1 Garand's superiority in rate of fire, accuracy, and reliability directly underpinned the success of America's island-hopping campaign, turning individual skill and industrial power into battlefield dominance. American forces could land on Japanese-held islands, confident in their ability to establish and hold beachheads against counterattacks. The firepower of M1-equipped infantry meant smaller forces could hold larger perimeters, allowing rapid buildup of forces for breakout operations. On island after island, Tarawa, Kwajalein, Anook, Saipan, Guam, Paleleu, Iwo Jima, Okinawa, the pattern repeated. Japanese forces unable to match American firepower resorted to increasingly desperate tactics. Banzai charges gave way to defense in depth. But even in fortified positions, the slow rate of fire from bolt-action rifles meant Japanese soldiers could rarely exploit opportunities when Americans exposed themselves during assault. The Japanese military's retention of bolt-action rifles stemmed significantly from their victory in the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905. In that conflict, Japanese infantry, armed with Type 30 and Type 35 Arisaka rifles, had defeated Russian forces through superior training, discipline, and tactical innovation. The Battle of Mukden and the Siege of Port Arthur seemed to validate the supremacy of Japanese warrior spirit over material factors. This success, however, created institutional blindness to technological change. The Japanese military establishment, dominated by officers who revered the Russo-Japanese War as Japan's coming of age as a great power, failed to recognize that warfare had fundamentally changed. World War I had demonstrated the dominance of firepower over Elan. But Japan, not having participated significantly in that conflict, failed to internalize its lessons. The American adoption of the M1 Garand reflected hard-learned lessons from World War I. General John J. Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Force, had witnessed the devastating effect of automatic weapons in France. In 1918, he specifically called for development of a semi-automatic rifle, stating, "The soldier who can deliver the most accurate fire in the shortest time will dominate the battlefield of the future." This requirement launched the development process that would culminate in the M1 Garand. The United States spent nearly 2 decades perfecting the design, conducting extensive trials, and building the industrial infrastructure for mass production. By 1936, when the M1 was adopted, America had created not just a superior rifle, but an entire system for producing, maintaining, and supplying it. The Japanese did eventually recognize the need for semi-automatic rifles. Development of indigenous designs began in the 1930s, including the Type Ko rifle designed by Kajiro Nambu and several gas-operated prototypes. However, these efforts received low priority with resources directed toward aircraft, naval vessels, and other programs deemed more critical. Most tellingly, when the Japanese finally attempted to copy the M1 Garand as the Type 4 rifle, often mistakenly called Type 5, they managed to produce only 250 part sets with approximately 100 to 125 rifles actually assembled before wear's end. The Type 4 chambered for 7.7 Japanese ammunition and fed from a 10-round internal magazine loaded with two 5-round. Stripper clips proved that Japan understood the M1's advantages, but lacked the industrial capacity for mass production. The mathematics of firepower revealed an overwhelming American advantage. The M1 Garand firing M2 ball ammunition delivered 2,656 lb of energy at the muzzle, with a trained soldier firing 40 rounds per minute. This translated to 106,240 lb of energy delivered per minute. A bolt-action Type 99 Arisaka firing the 7.7mm round with 2,300 lb per shot at a practical rate of 15 rounds per minute delivered only 4,500 lb per minute, less than 1/3 the M1's energy output. The 306 Springfield's trajectory, while having more drop than the 6.5mm Arisaka at extreme range, proved superior at typical Pacific combat distances. At 300 WID, an unusually long engagement distance in jungle warfare, the 306 dropped 13.5 in from line of sight, while retaining 1,800 lb of energy, sufficient to penetrate multiple layers of jungle vegetation and still incapacitate enemy soldiers. The 6.5mm Arisaka, while dropping only 11 in at the same range, retained only 100 lb of energy, often insufficient to penetrate cover. U.S. Army ordnance tests conducted at Aberdeen Proving Ground in 1940 quantified the M1's advantage. In controlled trials, soldiers with M1 Garands consistently achieved 24 aimed shots per minute at 200 YD with 90% hits on man-sized targets. Soldiers with M1903 Springfields, functionally identical to Arisaka operation, managed only 10 aimed shots with 85% accuracy. In rapid-fire scenarios simulating response to sudden attack, M1-equipped soldiers could engage 3 separate targets. In the time bolt action, users engaged 1. Further testing examined sustained fire over longer periods. After 5 minutes of continuous firing, M1-equipped soldiers maintained 80% of their initial rate of fire, while bolt-action users dropped to 60% due to fatigue from working the bolt. The M1's semi-automatic operation required only trigger finger movement, while bolt-action operation demanded gross motor movements of the entire arm on shoulder. Combat statistics from Pacific battles revealed telling patterns. At Guadalcanal, Army units equipped with M1 Garands expended an average of 150 to 200 rounds per man per day of heavy. Combat Marine units still equipped with Springfield rifles expended 60 to 80 rounds per man in similar conditions. This didn't represent ammunition waste, but rather the M1's ability to deliver effective fire at fleeting targets. Japanese forces, by comparison, rarely expended more than 40 to 50 rounds per man per day, limited by both ammunition supply and the mechanical constraints of bolt-action operation. Captured Japanese after-action reports frequently cited ammunition shortages. But even when ammunition was available, the slow rate of bolt-action fire limited consumption. Japanese military documents captured throughout the war revealed increasing awareness of American firepower superiority. A report from Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake, commanding the 17th Army on Guadalcanal, stated in November 1942, "Enemy rifle fire has density and accuracy beyond our expectations. Each enemy soldier appears to be armed with an automatic weapon. Our forces cannot achieve fire superiority even with numerical advantage. Recommend emphasis on night operations and infiltration tactics to negate enemy firepower advantage. By 1944, Japanese tactical doctrine had evolved to acknowledge American material superiority. The instructions for the decisive battle issued to defenders of the Marana Islands stated, "The enemy's automatic rifles and machine guns create an impenetrable wall of fire during daylight. All attacks must be conducted at night or under cover of adverse weather. Daytime movement invites annihilation." Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, the brilliant defender of Iwo Jima, wrote in January 1945, "The American automatic rifles are remarkable weapons. Each soldier possesses firepower equal to 3 or 4 of our riflemen. We must not waste lives in futile banzai charges against such firepower. Instead, we will make them pay for every meter of ground from fortified positions." His defensive strategy, avoiding suicidal charges in favor of defense in depth, prolonged the battle, but could not overcome American material superiority. The Japanese made several attempts to increase infantry firepower. The Type 100 submachine gun, introduced in 1942, was intended to provide automatic fire capability. However, production reached only about 27,000 units by war's end, insufficient to make a strategic difference. The weapon also fired the relatively weak 8mm Nambu pistol cartridge, lacking the range and stopping power needed for Pacific combat. More revealing was the Japanese effort to copy the M1 Garand itself. When American forces captured the Yokosuka Naval Arsenal in 1945, they discovered the Type 4 rifle program. Engineers at Yokosuka had reverse-engineered captured M1 Garands, modifying the design to use Japanese 7.7mm ammunition and feed from a 10-round internal magazine loaded with standard 5-round stripper clips. The Japanese had even improved certain aspects using a rubber recoil pad and adding a last-round bolt-hold-open feature. However, Japanese industry proved incapable of mass-producing this complex design. While they had manufactured parts for approximately 250 rifles, only 100 to 125 had been assembled into complete weapons. The Type 4 program revealed that Japanese military engineers fully understood the M1's advantages, but lacked the industrial infrastructure to produce it in meaningful numbers. Beyond industrial limitations, Japanese military culture resisted emphasizing material factors over spiritual ones. Colonel Masanobu Tsuji, a staff officer who served in multiple theaters, wrote after the war, "We knew the Americans had superior weapons, but to acknowledge this openly would have destroyed troop morale. We had to maintain belief in spiritual superiority, even as our soldiers were mowed down by American automatic weapons." This cultural resistance extended to training. Even as late as 1944, Japanese infantry training emphasized bayonet practice and night infiltration over marksmanship. The official infantry manual devoted 3 pages to rifle marksmanship, but 12 pages to spiritual preparation and bayonet fighting. This imbalance reflected deep-seated beliefs about the nature of warfare that technical realities could not easily overturn. The Battle of Okinawa, April through June 1945, provided the ultimate test of American firepower versus Japanese determination. Here on Japan's doorstep, 180,000 American troops faced 120,000 Japanese defenders in what would become the bloodiest Pacific battle. The Japanese under Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushima had learned from previous defeats. Instead of wasteful banzai charges, they prepared elaborate defensive positions in Okinawa's rocky terrain. Yet, even in defense, the limitations of bolt-action rifles proved critical. When American forces advanced, Japanese defenders armed with Arisaka rifles could rarely deliver sufficient volume of fire to stop them. Private First Class Desmond Doss, the conscientious objector medic who would receive the Medal of Honor, later described the sound of American rifles supporting his rescue efforts. "The Garands were firing so fast it sounded like one continuous roar. Our boys could keep Japanese heads down while I went out for wounded. If they'd all had bolt-action rifles like the Japanese, Iniver could have saved those men." Neither could have saved those men. On May 4, 1945, the Japanese launched their only major counteroffensive of the battle. 5,000 Japanese soldiers attacked American lines in a coordinated assault designed to break through to the American rear areas. The attack began at 04:44:30 hours, with the largest artillery barrage Japanese forces had managed in the Pacific War. 12,000 rounds in 30 minutes. As Japanese infantry emerged from their positions and charged across open ground, they met a wall of American fire. Private First Class Martin Brennanoff, the 17th Infantry Regiment, recalled, "They came at us in waves, but not the wild banzai charges we'd seen before. These were organized attacks with fire support. But our Garands never stopped firing. 8 shots, ping, reload, 8 more shots. The noise was incredible. The Japanese, with their bolt actions, would fire once, maybe twice. Then our semi-auto fire would cut them down. The attack shattered against American firepower with horrific Japanese losses. 4,000 dead versus 714 American casualties. The rapid fire of thousands of M1 Garand. M1 Garands, supported by automatic weapons and artillery, created killing fields where Japanese courage could not overcome material disadvantage. Even when Japanese soldiers reached American lines, the close-range firepower advantage of semi-automatic rifles proved decisive. Sergeant William Manchester, who would later become our renowned historian, fought on Okinawa with the 29th Infantry, the 29th Marines. He wrote, "The M1 rifle was our best friend. In the chaos of close combat, being able to fire 8 times without working a bolt saved countless American lives. I saw Japanese soldiers trying to work their bolt actions while under fire, their hands shaking, fumbling with the mechanism, while our boys simply kept pulling triggers." Planning for Operation Downfall, the invasion of Japan, scheduled to begin with Operation Olympic in November 1945, assumed the M1 Garand would play a crucial role. Military planners studying casualty rates from Okinawa calculated that American forces would need massive firepower superiority to overcome expected Japanese resistance on the home islands. Production plans called for 500,000 replacement M1 rifles for the operation, with Springfield Armory and Winchester increasing production to a combined 2,000 rifles daily by August 1945. International Harvester was scheduled to begin production at a 3rd facility. The ammunition requirement was staggering. Planners estimated needing 100 million rounds of .306 monthly for rifle use alone. Testimony to the volume of fire expected from M1 equipped troops. Intelligence estimates suggested Japanese homeland defense would include 25 million Arisaka rifles in military hands, plus millions more distributed to civilian militia units. However, many of these were training rifles, obsolete models, or last-ditch single-shot weapons. The Type 99 substitute standard rifles being produced in 1945 were so crude that American intelligence questioned their safety for the user. American planners calculated that each invasion beach would require suppression of Japanese positions by naval gunfire and aerial bombardment, followed by assault troops whose M1 Garands would provide the volume of fire needed to overcome. Defenders. Studies of Pacific engagements revealed that American troops armed with semi-automatic rifles sustained roughly 40% fewer losses than estimates for units equipped with bolt-action weapons under comparable conditions. The Japanese, aware of their disadvantage in firepower, prepared to rely on suicidal tactics, civilian resistance, and close-quarters combat in urban settings where rifle superiority would be less decisive. Secret post-war documents uncovered in Japan detailed extreme defensive plans. Civilians armed with bamboo spears, suicide swimmers carrying explosives, and even schemes to deploy biological agents. The Arisaka rifle, once the symbol of Imperial Army pride, had become only a small part of a desperate final defense. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki brought the war to an end before Operation Downfall could be launched. Later analysis suggested American casualties might have reached 500,000 to 1,000,000, with Japanese losses in the millions. The M1 Garand's superior firepower would have been crucial, but at a terrible human cost on both sides. The Garand's success reshaped global military rifle design. The Soviet Union, which had struggled to mass-produce its semi-automatic SVT-40 during the war, went on to create the SKS carbine, influenced by captured Garands. China's Type 56 carbine was essentially a clone of the SKS. France developed the MAS-49, drawing lessons from both the M1 and earlier French experiments. Even Britain, traditionally cautious about new small arms and content with its Lee Enfield rifles during the war, began post-war development of self-loading rifles. The Belgian FN-49, Swiss STG-57, and Italian BM-59 all reflected the same lessons America had demonstrated in World War II. The M1 Garand remained in frontline service through the Korean War, where it again outperformed the bolt-action weapons carried by Chinese and North Korean troops. In those early years of fighting, American soldiers, armed with Garands and backed by automatic weapons, repeatedly stopped massive enemy human wave assaults reminiscent of Japanese Banzai attacks. The rifle served until it was gradually replaced by the M14 in the late 1950s and early 1960s. In a remarkable twist of history, the United States later equipped the newly formed Japanese self-defense forces with surplus M1 Garands. Men whose predecessors had once faced the weapon now trained with it themselves, learning firsthand the power that had once opposed them. Roughly 150,000 Garands were supplied under U.S. military aid programs. Japanese veterans interviewed in the 1960s consistently credited American firepower, especially the M1 Garand, as a decisive element in their defeat. Ace pilot Saburo Sakai, Japan's most famous surviving fighter, said, "We could match American courage and tactics, but never their firepower. Every GI with his semi-automatic rifle was worth 3 of our men." Today, both the M1 Garand and the Arisaka are prized collector's items, though for very different reasons. The civilian marksmanship program has sold more than 500,000 surplus Garands to U.S. civilians, making it one of the most beloved historic rifles ever produced. Its distinctive ping when an empty clip ejects has become iconic in films, television, and video games. General George S. Patton's declaration that the M1 was the greatest battle implement ever devised remains largely uncontested. Among historians and firearms experts, modern shooting competitions still feature Garand matches, with the rifle proving impressively accurate even by contemporary standards. Arisaka rifles, particularly those retaining the original imperial chrysanthemum crest, are rare and valuable. Most had their crests ground off before surrender. Testing has shown the Arisaka's action to be exceptionally strong, even stronger than the Mauser or Springfield mechanisms, but that mechanical strength could never offset the limitations of a manually operated bolt. Remarkably, both rifles have continued to appear in modern conflicts. M1 Garands have surfaced in Middle Eastern wars through old U.S. aid programs, while Arisakas have been seen in Afghanistan and Myanmar, proof of their durability, even if long outdated. Back on that October night in 1942 at Henderson Field, Private Robert Young Deere and his comrades of the 164th Infantry Regiment demonstrated the devastating edge of semi-automatic rifle fire. They proved a fundamental truth of modern war. Technological superiority, powered by industrial strength, can decide battles regardless of bravery or will. The M1 Garand could deliver 40 to 50 aimed rounds per minute, compared to the Arisaka's 15 to 20, 8 rounds before reloading versus 5. Semi-automatic fire versus manual bolt cycling. The mathematics of combat, multiplied across thousands of firefights from Guadalcanal to Okinawa, helped seal the Pacific War's outcome. Lieutenant Kenji Yamamoto, who led his men in that October 24th charge with his Type 38, Arisaka, never saw the dawn. His rifle, renowned for its accuracy and craftsmanship, could not prevail against the storm of Garand fire that met him. When his body was found after the battle, 3 rounds remained in his magazine. He had fired twice while advancing barely 100 yards. Around him lay dozens of his men, most with nearly full magazines, cut down before they could even return fire. The story of the M1 Garand and the Arisaka is, ultimately, the story of the Pacific War itself, where courage and resolve, though noble, could not overcome the arithmetic of firepower. By 1945, the U.S. had built 5.4 million Garands, ensuring nearly every American rifleman carried semi-automatic firepower. Japan, despite producing more than 6 million rifles, never escaped the limitations of bolt-action design. Patton's famous praise of the M1 Garand was no exaggeration. It was mathematical truth. From the jungles of Guadalcanal to the volcanic wastes of Iwo Jima, and from the rain-soaked horror of Cape Gloucester to the battles that never came on Japan's home islands, the Garand proved far more than a rifle. It was a war-winning weapon that gave American forces a decisive edge in the most brutal theater of the most devastating war. T-T's metallic ping of an empty clip became the sound of victory. A sound that meant another enemy position silenced, another island secured, another step toward Tokyo Bay. Against it, the bolt-action Arisaka, for all its strength and accuracy, represented an earlier era of warfare. In the end, the Pacific War was decided not by valor alone, but by the relentless precision of gas-operated firepower. 8 rounds, 1 trigger pull at a time, until that unmistakable ping announced it was time to reload, and to keep fighting on.